Welcome to the RFP Success Show with host Lisa Warrick, the #1 sought-after authority on RFP success. Each week, we bring you information, strategies, or resources to help you win more business through RFPs and have a little fun doing it. Let's get this week's episode started.
All right, everybody. So we are back today with Donna, Warrick, president of Jameson Solutions. And last week we were talking a lot about how to manage people that are out of our control, how to manage people that we don't necessarily have any reporting line to, or we report to them, and how hard that can be to manage up. And Donna had so much great information, and we were just in the middle of transitioning to the topic of change management, which kind of encompasses all of this, but we are back today to talk about that. And Donna, really how I want to kick it off is I'd love for you to remind our listeners about the concept of above the line and below the line, because I have a feeling this is going to be a thread throughout the conversation as we move into change management.
Sure. So basically the way we operate, we have a choice. We can choose to operate above the line, which means that we are willing to consider other points of view, that we are naturally curious, we're open, we tend to listen more openly without judging, or we can choose to be and live and act below the line. So when you're below the line, you're really focused on what I call the not enough things. There's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough other resources. We tend to be more closed, we tend not to be willing to listen to other points of view. We may even be more defensive. We're going to hold on to those things that we believe. And really, when you're operating below the line, you're operating out of fear. It's, I may lose control of something. I may be wrong. They may find me out. But in order to be effective, to be able to influence, to be able to change minds, to be more agile in the world today and in our business, we have to operate above the line. It's also the way you build trust with the people on your team. It's a concept that we talk about a lot because it really is so important. And one of the things I mentioned in the last podcast was that we're actually hardwired. Our first reaction is to go below the line. And so we have to be really aware in that moment that stop and just think, okay, where am I right now? Yeah. Where do I need to be? And then what am I going to do to get there?
Yeah. And, one of the other really key things that you said in the last episode was that, we can't really afford, nobody can afford anymore to be operating below the line. Life is moving too quickly. And as you said, we've got to be more agile and innovative. And the world, in my opinion, is calling for all of us to be more self-aware. And that means being above the line, right?
Exactly right.
Yep. So let's talk about change management. What does that mean? What the heck do I mean when I talk about change management?
Well, there's a lot of different ideas and definitions out there, but in a nutshell, it is, how do I manage change? What are the things that I need to know and understand? If I'm the leader, how do I take our ever-changing world and the demands that our customers have on us, the demands that our people have on us, and how do I get my people to come along and be willing to do something that may take them out of their comfort zone? If I'm someone that is a part of a team, but I'm being managed, change management is, how do I understand this? How do I embrace it? What do I do? And how do I, through what I call followership, how do I be that good follower? And am I willing to take on the responsibility of bringing my colleagues along with me and being willing to, get out there and do something that's going to take me out of my comfort zone? I think that's the hardest thing for people. Most of my clients when I ask them, what are the biggest things that you're challenged with today? Probably 70% of the time it's managing change.
Why do people hate change so much? I'm a change junkie. I'm an entrepreneur, so it's hard for me to understand it. But I'm like, why are people so resistant to change?
Yeah. So, and again, we're going to talk a minute about behavior styles. There are certain styles, your style, my husband's style, in my style. We're okay with change. We are not risk avoidant. we are okay with risk. But there are some people that aren't wired that way. So that's one aspect. Behaviorally, it may just be more of a challenge to deal with the aspects of change. The other piece of it, and I think even people with an entrepreneurial mindset oftentimes may struggle because it's that fear. It's that fear of the unknown. It's the fear of, oh my gosh, I don't have all the answers. I'm the leader. I'm supposed to have all the answers. Or I'm the project manager. Everybody's coming to me. I need to have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. And I think navigating change is challenging, but it's this, I think it's a beautiful thing, actually. And I have a tendency to get stuck in my ways too. There are certain things, one of the things that I'm fighting in my own business is doing virtual training. I am such a people-oriented, interaction-driven person that I want to physically have that human interaction with you. I don't want to do it via a computer screen. And so I'm having to, with my own self right now, manage that change because it has to be done. Yeah. We're going to be behind if we don't do it. And so I'm having to really look at what it is that is keeping me or making me be so resistant. Because I think that's the first piece of change management is, first of all, we've got to get it out there and talk about it. Why are we resistant? What's going on? What are we afraid of? What are we concerned about? What does it look like for us when we talk about we're going to change this process? We're going to change this operation. We have to get it out there and talk about it.
So what do you do because I see this a lot, with my clients, one of the things that we do is we'll do strategic peer review of a proposal. So we come in on the back end and, I tell them we need 48 hours. So that means you've got to get your draft proposal done 48 hours in advance. And they'll just say, it can't be done. And, we hear that a lot in the whole RFP space. It can't be done. It can't be done. And you just talked about process, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what do you do when an organization or, a CEO or whoever that is says it can't be done?
Yeah. So that's where you have to be willing to get in there and ask questions. Mm. And the biggest thing and probably the most common question we ask is, what happens? What happens? You're saying it can't be done. And so what's going to happen if it can't be done? What are the risks? What are you going to lose if everything stays the way it is? And of course, I'm Southern, as you can tell by my accent. And Southerners always have sayings. And so the first thing that always comes to mind when I hear that term is can't, never, could, right? So we're going to spin our wheels. We're never going to get to that next place. We're never going to win. We're never going to improve, and we're going to fall behind. So when someone tells me, well, we can't do that, that's not going to happen, that's when I'm going to go back and ask questions about, well, let's take a look at that. If that's the case and nothing changes, what's going to happen? Mm. What are the risks? What are you going to potentially lose? Now I want to flip it around. So now let's say it can. Let's just for a moment pretend we live in another universe and we're saying, yes, it can happen, right?
Yep.
What does that look like? Oftentimes that sort of helps to, and again, what are you doing? You've got to influence that as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like it comes down again to fear, right? Yep. Like there's a fear of some sort that is still driving this.
Yeah. Yeah. And change. You're telling me I need to do this? Well, this isn't our normal mode of operation. So we can't do that.
Going to be too hard or So when you're looking at, let's say, a process change, mm-hmm. It's not just about changing the process, right? Like there's so much more to it. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I would say that in and of itself is probably the easiest part. It's getting people on board, right? Because just because you change a process doesn't mean that things are going to be different. Yeah. People have to be willing to change along with it. This is very nuanced because, number one, I've got to get out ahead of it. If I'm going to change a process or a procedure, I've got to get out ahead of it. And what that means is communication. I've got to communicate with those people. I've got to explain why we're making the change, how it's going to benefit them, what's in it for everyone, what are the risks if we don't do it. even in the way I approach it is, number one, I talk about what I call the current state. So here's where we are, and here is where we need to be. If we stay where we are now, here are the risks. If we change this and do it differently, here's the benefits. This is what's in it for you.
Yeah.
And I've got to communicate that. And I've got to be open to spending time with people because, like you said, someone like you with your style, they're all about it. They're like, I'm in, let's do it. What do you need from me? And that's going to be part of your group. The other part is going to be like, oh, I don't know. There's so many things that could go wrong with this. Well, I really like doing it the way we're doing it. I don't see why are we changing just for the sake of changing. So we're going to get that pushback, right? So in order to manage that, you've got to be willing to spend time and continue to communicate the value of doing this with those individuals, because everybody's going to have a different timeline of when they're able to accept, get on board, and start being motivated to make that change happen. And so I think communication is a big part of it, is we've got to be able to communicate. And again, it's not just from the person leading. We need to find advocates within. So,
great point. Yeah.
You're a perfect example. I know that Lisa is comfortable with change. She's not risk avoidant. She's excited about doing something different. I'm going to make her one of my internal advocates. I'm going to have you go out and advocate to you because you're the peer. You're among them, and you can have those conversations. And so I'm going to look for those Lisas on the team to be able to also drive that message. And so I think that's you got to get out ahead of it. And then all along the way, you've got to be willing to have, again, those conversations and walk people through it. Some people, you're doers, they're going to get out there and be action oriented and go, but other people really need more clear, concise, step by step. This is what needs to happen. These are the expectations. And you have to, if you're the one driving that change, have to recognize, because everybody's going to need something a little different.
Yeah. And you said something key there too. You said you have to be able to communicate what's in it for them. So I see so many times an organization will communicate what's in it for the organization, and they think that that's, the most important thing. And really nobody gives a crap, right?
Hey, that's right. There's nothing wrong with saying what's in it for the organization. But if I can't make this personal, then it's not going to work. You have to remember that, again, we're dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
Different things are going to resonate with different people. I need to know that this isn't going to cost me more time. I need to know that this isn't going to, it's not going to bleed over into my personal life. Or I need to know that I still have, that I'm not losing control of a project or whatever it is, depending on the individual. And so I need to be able to build the case of what's in it for you, because I can't make this change happen if I don't have you.
Oh, I love that. And to me, that also states that your communication cannot be one-dimensional.
Right.
Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think too, oftentimes that's where we make mistakes, is that we feel like that we've done a fantastic job of describing the change, talking about the possibilities, building the picture in the minds of people. But have we stopped and asked, what do you need? What are you concerned about? Where do you see? And oftentimes when we miss out on a lot of stuff, because as much as we may have thought this through, there may be other things out there that we didn't realize, that we hadn't considered.
Likely other things out there that you didn't, right?
Yeah, I can't ever recall a time in my career where, when I was asked to communicate some change, that there were things that we didn't realize.
Yeah.
Just hadn't prepared for. And had we not had these discussions with the people who were going to be affected by the change, it could have been a disaster. And you know what? I think, and people need to be heard.
People love to be heard, right? Yeah. They want to and need to feel heard.
Yeah. And so I need to be willing to listen. I need to be willing to hear and understand the concerns, recognize that maybe there's another way, another thing that we didn't look at. And wow, you've got some great ideas. Let's talk about that. All of those things where people start to feel like they're really a part of and can get behind the change. You're going to get a lot more positive response. and gain earlier momentum if people can really see it, understand it, and recognize that there's value in it. And you cannot have a one-sided conversation and that happen. Just not going to happen.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting as I'm sitting here listening to you talk, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my head's kind of spinning, just because in the proposal world and the RFP world, which frankly this is anywhere, but things have been really slow, especially in the government side. If they're bidding on government RFPs, it feels like not a whole lot has changed, but the world is changing fast. As you stated, I can't remember, it might have been in the other podcast, but you were talking about how technology alone is forcing us to move quicker and need to be agile and innovative. We have to change. So this isn't like a one and done thing. This isn't like we're going to implement this one change. It's going to be painful for me to figure out how to communicate because this is a one-time thing. No, we are changing all the time. And frankly, if you're somebody that hates change, you're going to get left in the dust. You've got to learn how to embrace it. I mean, this is my high D and my directness coming out, but darn it, you've got to learn how to embrace change, because the change isn't happening just for change's sake. The change is happening because something somewhere needs to get better.
Yeah. That's
right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
When do you think change will just not happen in an organization? If they say we need to change this, what do you think would be present for you to know this is just not going to happen?
Gosh, that's a great question. So let me make sure I'm understanding. So you're saying, we've got this, again, we'll just say a process. We've got this process and we want to change. And somewhere along the way, we have this realization that this is just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. And there's not one answer.
Of course.
There's not a straight answer for this. Again, it's really depending on what are the stakes, right?
Yeah.
What happens if we don't have the change? I think, and you mentioned the government segment. I do think the government segment is one of the last ones to sort of come on board with things, but they are changing.
Yeah.
And they have to.
They have to. Absolutely.
So I would like to say there should never be a time where you say this is not going to happen. Okay? Because you're not going to change something. Anybody with any sense of reality will not just go in and make a change for the sake of making a change. Yes, we have people, especially in your startups, your entrepreneurs, they are what I call on change high a lot of times. Always trying something new, want to try, let's figure it out, right? But even those people will recognize that we can't just change for the sake of changing. There has to be a reason behind it. And so if we're going to make that change, we have to look at the other side of it. What happens if we don't make it? Are we going to be relevant? Are we going to get the business? Are we going to be left behind, as you said, left in the dust, right? And so if I see that these are the things that are going to happen if we don't make this happen, it's just not an option. So I may have to change my approach. I may have to attack it from a different way, but it's going to have to happen. The only time I would say that maybe where we just say, we're not going to do this, is if we're really at risk of losing key talent over it. If we're at risk of it being a detriment to our bottom line, the cost, the dollar cost just gotten so astronomical, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I would say, okay, that's a time when we have to say, we've got to figure out, we've got to do this differently. But then I go back to, look, before you go and make a change, before you say, we're going to change our practices, we're going to adopt a new process, whatever it is, you need to think it through.
It's a great point because
these.
Yeah, it's a great point, because what I was going to say there is like, okay, so if an organization, they know they need to change, but they're really not willing to change, they likely haven't tied to the potential outcome, the need, the pain that they've got now, and the potential outcome of how it could be better. It sounds like that tie hasn't been made, that gap hasn't been closed enough, if they're really not willing to do it. Because I do come across a lot of organizations that say they want it, but they're not really willing to do the work to get there.
Yeah. And again, it just goes back to the fear, right?
Yeah.
It's the fear of making a mistake, of the unknown, of the uncomfortableness of change, worry that you're not going to have the tools, the wisdom, the experience to make that change. So yeah, you're basically saying, I'm going to take a risk on this. But if you're making a change, or if you're part of an organization that is undergoing that change, I think what's important to recognize is hopefully the organization has thought this through, recognizing the risks of not doing anything, of staying where we are, understanding the rewards of when that change happens, and also absolutely understanding that, again, we're dealing with human beings and how vitally important it is for everyone to be willing to embrace the change and move forward. And again, just seeing that X needs to be changed, and this is what's going to happen to, in terms of we're going to do this, this, and this to make that change. That's sort of the easy part. The hard part is the people part.
Yep. Yeah.
And I always say, just you got to keep your eye on the prize.
Yes.
Remember why.
And you have to have planned and had the conversations and taken the time in order to know what that is and to be able to hold tight to it. So yeah, I love that. And I love what's the risk of not making the change, right? That can be just as uncomfortable if you really stop and think about it. For me, I know, but like you said, I'm one of those people that embraces change, and that's easy for me if I'm connected to it, if I can find that risk reward kind of combo there. So this has been so great, Donna, as I knew that it would, because you're brilliant. So I appreciate you being here. How can people learn more about you or get in touch if they want to work with you?
Yeah, well, I would recommend going to our website. It is jamesonsolutions with an S.com. So JAMESSON solutions with an S.com. We've got a great website that has a lot of information about our company. So I would recommend doing that. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And so if you're interested in connecting with me, I would love to connect with you, and we can start the conversation on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. And we'll have both of those links in the show notes for everybody. So once again, Miss Donna, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you and all of your wisdom that you've been willing to share with us.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And it's always a pleasure to talk with you. And I wish you tons of success. I love that you're doing this podcast. I think it's going to be helpful to so many people. So much success.
Thank you so much. Talk soon. All right, everybody, you've been listening to the RFP Success Show with Lisa Rehurick. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so. We always love your reviews, always appreciate your reviews. So if you like what you hear, please drop us a review, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
You have been listening to the RFP Success Show with RFP expert Lisa Rehurick, author of the RFP Success Book. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure you click the subscribe button so you don't miss a show. And thanks for spending time with us today.